lot of saint films out there in the wilderness, and there's a lot of saint films here on this list. I haven't got the list handy, but we've got Therese, we've got a couple of films about St. Francis of Assisi, Flowers of St. Francis and Francesco,
Monsieur Vincent,
A Man for All Seasons. And so one question that kept coming up was sort of, how to depict a saint in film, or put another way, what makes a great saint film, and has one been made yet? And anything I'm missing on that?
No,
so I'll leave it open to any or all of you to respond to that if you wish.
I'll jump in. I've thought a little bit about this question. It's the films that you mentioned, the saint films on the list. There's quite a variety and a variety of approaches. So it's hard to really generalize across, like, what do they have in common, because they're quite distinct entries. But one thing I've thought of is how I think saint films and kind of hagiographies in general can kind of die of mediocrity, to put it that way, or like just really not be so interesting at the end of the day. Is how I think somehow there's a tendency to want to depict the saint as like a finished product, like to show the saint in their like perfected saintliness. And then effectively, if like that's where the film starts, there's nowhere for them to go other than just to kind of be mistreated by everyone around them. And so I think in some ways, maybe, to generalize big picture, and not necessarily talking about the films on the list, but many of these saint movies that we can find around, is that maybe so far don't really start at the right point. Maybe we need to like find the drama inside that saint's life and more focus this telling on like their struggle to become the saint, rather than just what their biography was for them, like being a saint for 40 years.
Yeah, one of the films that I got to review was The Passion of Joan of Arc, which I think is a tremendous saint film. I think that the intensity of it is precisely not just a kind of saccharine hagiographical thing. It's extremely psychological, and it deals with just all kinds of interesting dynamics. So I love that. To my mind, the great saint film of recent times is A Hidden Life by Terrence Malick. And I think no doubt that would be on a list if it was made. I mean, it's really hard for me to think of a better saint film than that movie, although Franz Jägerstätter, I guess, he's still a blessed or something. But I mean, the way that it depicts his struggle, his journey, also the forces of the culture upon him, I don't think you're going to top that.
And Father Michael?
Well, the only saint film I had to review was A Man for All Seasons, which we've already talked about a bit. But I mean, on David's point about where you start in the life story of the protagonist, I mean, Man for All Seasons starts quite close to the end of St. Thomas More's life, when he's already obviously acquired a great degree of holiness, and it's because he's a holy man that he stands out against Henry VIII. And that's where the real drama of his life, you might say, begins. Because, okay, you are a saintly man. Are you going to continue to be saintly even under the pressure of looming death? And that's, I suppose, the drama of A Man for All Seasons, that he's put under ever greater loads of stress. His faith is put under this stress test, and it survives, and he is martyred, and it's really largely because he was martyred that we think of him, that he has become a saint. He is a martyr saint. There are plenty of saints who aren't martyrs, but their lives tend to be perhaps less dramatic. Is that a fair generalization? Maybe not, but that's all I have to say on the topic.
Yeah, it seems to me that the saint, just taken generally, is a person of such greatness of spirit that you are almost forced to consider a kind of fragmented picture. Like you can't capture this magnanimity within an hour, 2 hours on film. That there has to be sort of a consideration of the saint under a certain aspect. And that was one impression that I had going through the different saint films on the list, was like, oh, well, yeah, this is really interesting because this really captures this aspect of this saint or whatever. But then, yeah, I think to the point that you made, David, Monsieur Vincent comes to mind as another film where St. Vincent de Paul is already a very holy man at the beginning. And we talked about this in our discussion of that film, is how it was, how interesting it was as a film, precisely because it was able to maintain interest, even as this character was already quite perfect at the beginning.
Right.
But he's going deeper. So there is still growth, and you can track that. Even at the end, he's still sort of trying to get this harsh duty of sanctity is still driving him forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I was glad to hear this mention of A Hidden Life. Now that we've completed our survey of the Vatican film list, we're going deep into different directors, and we've just begun our slow creep through the full filmography of Terrence Malick, and we'll be capping that with a consideration of A Hidden Life, no doubt.
Could I add just one more comment that just came to my mind as we're thinking about the saints thing? The difficulty maybe in making a saint movie is the same reason why it's difficult to make a movie about Jesus, and that's why. Am I wrong? There's no movies about Jesus on the. No, there are a couple. I didn't have any, but I mean the list is not heavy with Jesus movies, right?
Right.
Why? It's hard to make a movie about Jesus because you're making movies about transformation, about growth, about setbacks and redemptions and like all these things that we don't sort of consider to be characteristic of holiness, I guess.
Yeah. Thomas and James, you might take a different.
We only have a few minutes left. Go ahead.
I was just going to say something controversial that might make us talk for another hour. But I was going to say one of my my favorite saint movie, like saint in scare quotes on the list, was Gandhi, which I felt like
boo,
which I felt like, however, kind of accurate to the biography of the man. And so on. I felt like presented, if we take half a step back and abstract, but like shows in a really compelling way how like a virtuous person can affect like change in the world, which I think like,
Yeah.
Okay.
I would. We had a very spicy take on that one when we talked about it.